Good morning, Congressman Javier Becerra, Chairman of the House Democratic Caucus, joined by our Vice Chairman, Joe Crowley of New York. We just finished our House Democratic Caucus meeting this morning, where members had a number of things to discuss. First and foremost, we wanted to extend our condolences to the families and the victims of the recent storms that have hit the southeast of our country. We understand that at this stage, dozens have died, scores have been injured, many have lost everything they've owned, and we want to extend to them not just sympathies, but a word that we are ready, working with the President, to do what we can to try to help in providing that federal assistance and the support that people expect when a natural disaster like this hits. And so our heartfelt sympathies go out to all the families that have been impacted, and we understand that those storms are still there. And so we hope that everyone is prepared and braced down, have found protection and safety, and that we can move forward together. But our fellow Americans who are in these states that have been impacted most should know that many of us here in Washington, D.C., when we come here from throughout the country, are prepared to be there to help our fellow Americans. Back home, for the last 2 weeks, many of our members were very busy. We had many of our members report back on some of their activities, over 1,700 different activities and events held by Democrats throughout the country, principally dealing with the economy. Most of our members have focused on trying to keep Americans working, get them back to work, trying to make sure that we grow our economy for all Americans, not just the very wealthy. And we want to make sure that we're out there making sure that the tax code is fair for all. I know many Americans just finished submitting their taxes, and so what we want to do is make sure that this economy, as it continues to grow, is growing for everyone, not just the very wealthy. We know that over these last 2 weeks, several of our Republican colleagues, surprisingly, but also we think in a good way, have come out in support of moving forward on something that's been festering in the House for over 300 days, and that is the lack of action on fixing our broken immigration system. It's been 306 days since the Senate, on a bipartisan basis, moved a common sense fix for our broken immigration system. And for 306 days, House Republican leaders have sat on that bill and any other legislation that would help us fix this broken immigration system. At the same time, of course, we know that every day some 1,000 individuals are separated from family, loved ones, neighbors, as they are picked up, oftentimes deported. And we think it's time to act. When over the course of 300 plus days, you have so many hundreds of thousands of families being separated, it's time for us to act. We also know that the lack of action here in the House of Representatives by our Republican leadership in the House has caused the economy to suffer, because fixing the broken immigration system, we know now, helps our economy, helps create more jobs, and certainly we know that we're less safe, less secure when we have a broken immigration system that we must work under. And so for all those reasons, we hope that the recent statements by everyone from the House Republican Conference Chairwoman Kathy McMorris Rogers to two of our colleagues from Illinois, Aaron Schock and Adam Kinzinger, to move forward on a vote for a common sense fix to our broken immigration system, all bode well for finally tackling something. And we hope that Speaker Boehner is prepared to listen to his colleagues in his Republican conference to move forward. I do want to quote something that Speaker Boehner himself said. Quote, "We get elected to make choices. We get elected to solve problems, and it's remarkable to me how many of my colleagues just don't want to. They take the path of least resistance." Mr. Speaker, it's time to stop taking the path of least resistance, to heed the call of your own Republican leadership colleague, the words of your own Republican conference colleagues, and give us a vote on finally fixing a broken immigration system for our economy, for our security and for all of our families. And we also want to make sure that as we move forward, we're doing things so that every American benefits, not just the very wealthy. And the Vice Chairman and I are going to have to run pretty quickly from here because we have a markup in the Ways and Means Committee on legislation that would provide over $300 billion worth of tax breaks to some of the largest corporations in this country, not pay for it, and therefore add to the deficits, and at the same time doing nothing to provide assistance or relief to hardworking taxpayers who just by April 15th had to submit their tax filing. And so, again, we want to grow our economy, but we want to grow for all Americans, not just the very wealthy. With that, let me yield to our Vice Chairman.
Congressman Joe Crowley, Vice Chair of the Democratic Caucus. I don't often do this, but critique my chairman. You have to work on your John Boehner imitation. That's for sure. You got the words right. But I too want to join with the chairman in expressing my thoughts and prayers for the victims of this latest storm that has really devastated parts of our country. And I stand prepared as a member of the New York delegation, I think speaking on behalf of New York, having suffered through a devastating storm about a year and a half ago in Superstorm Sandy. We stand prepared to help our fellow Americans during this time of need, both immediately and in the long term. And I believe very strongly in emergencies like this, we help our citizens first. We worry about paying for it later on. I think most Americans overwhelmingly agree with that as well. I also want to just piggyback just very briefly, because we do have a Ways and Means markup to go to. And that is talking about how I think Democrats are prepared. We've come back, after the Passover, Easter break in our districts, with our constituency, hearing back from them and their feedback. This new beginning, maybe coming back to Washington, and maybe Washington will change. I hold out some hope that maybe Washington will change and we'll actually get some things accomplished, like a jobs bill, like an infrastructure bill, like a bill that will, for once and for all, or at least for the time being, fix our immigration system. A bill that will extend unemployment insurance for people who are desperately trying to make ends meet in their homes today. Those are the types of issues that my constituency would like to see us acting upon, and stop some of the gamesmanship that's going on, the theater that's going on, similar to the theater that will take place in the Ways and Means Committee later today. As the chairman said, we have so many people who are suffering because of this economy and the lack of movement here in Washington to help drive a jobs bill through the House. And we're focusing on some of the wealthiest corporations in the world, at the same time not really addressing the needs of middle-class America. I think we can do both. We can address the issues of tax extenders, and at the same time also we need to address the needs of middle-class America. And this Republican Congress just simply is not doing that.
We'll take a question or two before we run.
Do you have any thoughts on Secretary Kerry's comments that Israel risks sending the protest?
I didn't hear that remark, and so it'd be tough for me to comment. I'm not sure what the context was, Joe. I don't know if you.
I did hear the remark. I disagree with the Secretary on that, but I also understand that the Secretary has walked back that and has readdressed that issue as well, and I think has sufficiently apologized for that statement, and I accept that.
And I'll associate myself with the Vice Chairman's remarks on that. I certainly think there's a bipartisan mood to try to make sure that we are doing our job of oversight. When you start to go beyond oversight and trip into this world of witch hunt and fishing expedition, it makes it difficult to have not just a productive process, but one that has legitimacy. I think Republicans in the House, unfortunately, have taken what should have been a serious oversight investigation over the IRS and turn it into something that's political theater. If we can return to having this be a bipartisan process where we all want to find out about the undertakings of the IRS, then I think we'll get far. But if the Republicans want to play this game of gotcha and going after folks where the evidence doesn't really substantiate doing some of these things, it's just an abuse of the legislative process and an abuse of your chairmanship, as we've seen. It's unfortunate because Democrats were one of the earliest to come forward and say, with regard to Ms. Lerner, that we needed to get to the bottom of this. In fact, the ranking Democrat on the Ways and Means Committee was among the first, if not the first, to suggest that Ms. Lerner should resign. But this has gone into political theater, and it's unfortunate because there is a job that we have to do here in Congress when it comes to oversight of the federal agencies. But to go out there and treat this like a McCarthy hearing it just doesn't work. The American people don't like it, and neither do members of Congress who want to actually do their job the right way of fulfilling the oversight responsibility that we have under the Constitution.
Or the circumstances so extreme, so unique, as you say, going after her in a McCarthy-like fashion, that you think that would be in order to have that?
So just briefly, and I'll let the Vice Chairman also respond. Look, if bipartisanly we agree in a particular direction on one of these hearings, then I don't think that's political theater because you've got all the sides agreeing this is what we have to do. If we agree that this course of action would be helpful to the process, then I think it would be productive. I wouldn't preclude anything that lets us delve deeper in a productive, bipartisan fashion. It's when we start to see the Congress break down and do things partisanly, in a way that shows that it's not a real investigation, but it's a political witch hunt which causes problems.
I would just say briefly, as the chairman has mentioned, when this whole affair began, both Democrats and Republicans called for Ms. Lerner to resign. She testified before a subcommittee that I'm a member of. I asked a question that she misled our subcommittee on, and 2 days later planted a question to answer the question I had asked her before that committee. Maybe that's the reason why she's taken the Fifth Amendment. I quite frankly don't know why she's taken the Fifth Amendment. That's between herself and her attorney. What I do know is that when anyone ever takes the Fifth Amendment, it creates incredibly great theater here in Washington, where Darrell Issa and others can stand up and lambast the witness because she's choosing to protect her constitutional rights. This may very well be, as the chairman has indicated, an opportunity for cooler heads to prevail, to allow for Ms. Lerner to come before the body and explain to some degree just what is leading to her pleading of the Fifth. Why is that happening? Because I quite frankly don't know at this point. She knows, and maybe her attorney knows, but I don't know what that is. And if there's some way we can bring this whole affair to an end, because I think what's most important about this is that both liberal groups and conservative groups were targeted because of their political beliefs by the IRS, and that needs to change. That cannot be tolerated. And at the same time, the 501c4s have been misused by entities for political purposes only and for the purposes of hiding big cash spending in campaigns, and that needs to end as well.
One final question. Yeah.
Look, the reality is that every person is entitled to his or her day in court. He's been indicted, and the justice system will work its will. And ultimately, the people of his district will make that determination. I fully support his opponent, Dominic Recchia, a former city councilman, someone who I think has the skills to adequately and more than adequately represent the people of Staten Island and Brooklyn here in the House of Representatives. and that's why I've been supporting him all along. The reality is, on my understanding of the election law, not an election attorney, is that there are very few options in terms of removing him from the ballot. So it's not a question of what I want him to do. I don't support Mr. Grimm. I haven't supported, never supported Mr. Grimm. I've supported all of his opponents, and I will continue to do so. And in this vein, I believe that Dominic Recchia will be the next congressman from Staten Island and Brooklyn.
Americans want to trust the people they elect to be their leaders, and Americans deserve to have people they can trust be their leaders. In so many things that we do, we demonstrate as elected representatives and as leaders whether we deserve that trust and confidence. It's up to Mr. Grimm to decide what he does, because he got elected rightfully. For him to determine whether or not his constituents back home in New York can trust him, have confidence in him. But I do know this, that the moment you lose the trust of the folks back home, you're done. Thank you all very much.